everyone, and welcome to Being Black in Britain, the podcast that captures the nature and the essence of the Black experience across the UK, but starting with the north of England. In today's episode, we will be speaking with Miles Tagoe, ex-Marine and educator based in Liverpool. We will be discussing all things education, representation and faith. Let's go. All right, so thank you, Miles, for coming on to Being Black in Britain. I am really excited to explore your journey as a top scouser in Liverpool.
Top scouser?
Yes, because obviously, you know, as per my introductions, we're trying to capture the Black experience, but we are starting with the North. Just as Christian said last week, there's just not enough representation in the North. And for me, it's hearing the different accents, different experiences in the context of the North of England, for me, is really special. Mm-hmm. It just brings it right back home. So I can't wait to explore that with you. But before we dig in, can you introduce yourself? Who are you and what do you do and why do you do it?
Wow. So my name is Miles Tagoe. What do I do? I'm a teacher. Trained secondary teacher, but I'm a lecturer in FE at the minute. Why do I do it? I do it to serve the kids of Liverpool, really. And that might sound a little bit cheesy, but
It does.
But I've always basically worked with kids. I was a father at a young age, and to see kind of kids flourish is one of the most rewarding things you can see. So that's why I do it.
Did you? Before we unpack this, did you ever go away for like uni, for any purposes? Did you ever spend any time out of Liverpool?
Yeah. So I was in the military before I was a teacher for 7 years. So I spent a lot of time outside of Liverpool. Most of my young life from the age of 16 to 23. I was in a lot of places in Africa, Europe, a little bit of the Middle East. I spent time outside of Liverpool. I taught a little bit as I stepped into uni as well in South Africa. Okay. In the kind of the townships there. So right. Me accent's still strong. But
that's impressive.
Yeah, I've been about a bit.
Okay. So in light of that, you've been around the world, you've explored. Why then did you choose to come back to Liverpool and kind of establish roots again here?
Even though kind of, a lot of people have a dream of traveling or emigrating. Yeah. I remember when I was young, I wanted to emigrate to the US, actually. Okay. Just because of the media influence and kind of your favourite films, they're all, American and so on. But I found as I travelled, I was always yearning to come home. I was yearning for those kind of home comforts, seeing me ma. That's my mother in English, but in Scouse,
English,
it's me ma, me family, all my friends, and kind of, I'm from Toxteth in Liverpool. And that kind of, it's always had my heart. So I always wanted to come back. I was in Somalia, I could have been in South Africa or Tanzania. I was thinking of Toxteth. So I was always coming back to my area and my city.
Do you think that's something about the culture of Liverpool? Because I find that with a lot of friends, Scouse friends that I have, everybody has chosen to stay in Liverpool, whether they went away for uni, whether they went away for work. Everyone has somehow, some way come back and decided to set roots in Liverpool. What is it about the Liverpool culture that makes everybody want to stay?
I think there's a life in Liverpool. There's a philosopher called Carl Jung, and he called Liverpool a pool of life. There's a statue down the road. There's a real life in Liverpool. It's a place where people pass through from all different places, but it has a warmth to it, and there's just a real joy in the people. So compared to, say, when I've lived in other places, Liverpool people are willing to talk to you all the time. They'll ask you how you're doing. They'll crack a joke with you pretty much straight away. That's quite unique compared to the rest of the world. And when you go out other places, you taste different cultures, and there's some really great things about other cultures, and it broadens you. But coming back to Liverpool is it's home. Do you know what I mean? And there's something to it that I think every Scouser just loves, and we're quite tribal with it. We hold on to our city, and we love it.
I've definitely witnessed the tribalism.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing. Sometimes I think we can go overboard, but it's a kind of, we're fiercely defensive of our families, communities in our city.
Interesting. Now, I want to talk about you, your career specifically. So you said that you are teaching in Liverpool at present. My question is, why did you choose the teaching profession? I know you said earlier that you want to be of service to the kids, but we can serve young people in all kinds of ways. Why did you choose teaching specifically from military?
I thought about I was leaving the military and I was thinking about what career I could step into because I'd been in the military since I was 16.
Yeah.
So I was thinking, what next? And some of the greatest people who impacted my life were my teachers. I was quite a terrible pupil at school in terms of completing coursework and homework.
Not Miles being a terrible student.
I was the kid who was always in isolation, or
right.
You know, I mean, I got arrested on work experience. I was a different person. But
we're gonna talk about this in a second.
Nah, we leave that out for me. My mum won't want me talking about that. Brought the police to a door. But it kind of my teachers were kind of massive people who impacted me. Okay. Even though I was acting up, I had certain teachers who loved me, who pressed me to use my ability. And whatever they came out with from school, it was because of them. It wasn't because of me. I had no time for school. I wanted to be one of the boys to get me on the street, and the teachers were like pressing me to at least use some of my potential.
So in the same way that you say that your teacher saw a bit of potential in you, how do you find that in your particular position that you can look at students maybe that find it difficult to engage with their learning, with school or whatever it is, and do you feel like in the same way that your teacher saw potential in you that you're able to see that in those students, that maybe other staff members aren't able to see that potential in the child?
Yeah, I don't want to denigrate me fellow teachers. Some of them get vexed and some of them despise the kids. But you know, that's they still do the job.
Yeah.
They might do it from a place of anger, but they still do the job. Still, maybe for the wages. But for me, it kind of, I never write kids off.
Okay.
So when I'm walking into a classroom or even like you might be, you know, starting somewhere new or covering someone else's class when you're supposed to be planning in your own time. You know that well.
I know the ones.
And there'll be kids in there that you've heard in the staff room, they're hard work.
Yeah.
But for me, I'm like, nah, I'll see what they're like.
Yeah.
And I'll see if I can get through the front that they put on to see the real kid, because every kid wants to do well. Every kid wants to enjoy school, even if they hate it and they say it's boring. Like there's a real, there's just a real kind of diamond inside of every kid, and you've just got to mine it a little bit.
Yeah.
Some of them, it's hardened and there's a little shell over it, and you got to chip away at that, and that might take months, or it might take one lesson. So I think I just don't write them off, and I try and just show them love. Really, that's cheesy as well, but there we go.
It's cheesy, but what does it look like to show a student love? This is a child that's not your child. And oftentimes these children come to the classroom with just so much baggage, so much brokenness, so many challenges that they're carrying on the shoulder, and it's obviously presented in really difficult ways in the classroom. What does it look like for you to show a child love regardless of how they are presenting in the institution, in the school, in the classroom?
I think the first thing is to listen to them. So if I have a kid who comes in and he's or she's kicking off, the immediate thing is to just slap them down. But I'll take them aside, away where there's no other attention on them apart from me and them, maybe outside the classroom. And just listen to them and say, what's up? Do you know what I mean? What's going on? And a lot of them appreciate that. They appreciate that you're not just, bringing the hammer down. You're actually, you wanna at least kind of hear them. I think the second thing with them also though is kind of healthy boundaries.
Yeah. What does that look like?
What that looks like is kind of teaching with a smile, but also with behind that smile, you can switch it up. So like I'm a dad, so like I'll have a laugh with my kids. But I know when to turn the dad face on and give them that look where they go, whoa, like
the look.
The look.
Not the look. We know that one, yeah.
So it's kind of, I do that with the kids, like they'll know I want to have a laugh with them as we learn.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's also a line where like, don't cross me in a sense of like, I'm going to respect you, you respect me back. Otherwise it's going to fall down. And you kind of, if you let them know that early, I think they really respect you. I think the idea of being like a fluffy teacher who hugs everyone and like, you know, you're amazing.
Fluffy.
Like there's an element where kids do need that. They do need a hug and they do need to be praised, but they also need to be kind of shown that there's boundaries to any kind of social interactions, boundaries to it. And that's kind of, that's what I try and do in the classroom.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. And touching on sort of your relationship with your students, my question is, do you feel that you represent to some degree the demographic of your student population? The reason I ask that is that my teaching experience, I was always the only Black teacher in the whole entire school. There were times where I was the only Black person among both staff and students. Wow. I never represented the student body that I taught. But that did not stop me from establishing really healthy and warm relationships with my students. It was lovely. But I could see the challenges that it brought to light because I didn't look like them. I didn't come from the same background as them. So likewise, do you feel like racially you represent any part of your student body, and what does that look like in terms of your relationship with your students, how you connect with them?
Yeah, I think I've worked in a number of different kind of schools,
right?
Colleges. So I've experienced what you've talked about, and I've experienced the opposite. So I've been in like really diverse schools.
Yeah.
And it was quite funny, to be honest, because the kids would make jokes that you got because they were from your culture. Do you know what I mean? And it'd be quite funny, like as they're lining up for the class or whatever, they'd be like, "There's the road man." Do you know what I mean? But because I had the fade, or they'd be like, "Oh, sir, where'd you get your fade from? What barber did you go to? This and that." And they'd name local barbers who I knew. So it was good. And I knew the brothers and I knew their uncles, and you know what I mean? So that was like, it's a bit like heaven, to be honest, in a sense of like in teaching.
I can only imagine.
But also teaching in the opposite end of the spectrum. I think when you do stand out, it's kind of, you have to break down kind of preconceived ideas the kids might have about music you're into, or they'll compare you to every kind of, they'll compare you to every famous person who looks like you or doesn't look like you, but they think do. So I've had to put that face on a few times, I was talking about earlier. But I think in Liverpool especially, there's a common kind of, there's a lot of kids from estates, from low income backgrounds. So even though they might not have had anything in common with them, you know, ethnically, I had things in common with them in terms of, you know, the areas they were from, the problems, the socio-economic problems they faced, the cultures in terms of crime and drugs and stuff like that. So yeah, it was kind of, I could bridge that gap there.
Yeah, I like that.
So it's finding that you've got something in common with everyone you meet.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, you have to find that, and it's effort. Do you know what I mean? Because it's easier to go to retreat and isolate. But the way, even before when I was in the military, like I was in a room full of people I didn't know, and from Commonwealth countries and from Scotland and Newcastle and London. It was like, no one cared who I was from Toxteth and my background. So I had to kind of learn how to interact with different kinds of people, and that's really served me in teaching.
I like that. And there's something that you said that I wanted to kind of unpack a little bit, where you talked about sort of the demographic of the students that you've taught, being specifically in Liverpool, being from predominantly sort of deprived areas where there were a lot of sort of social and economic issues facing these children, these families. My question then is, at present, you being in the classroom and engaging with all these students, what are some of the social issues that you think are challenging students and maybe interrupting or disrupting their ability to access learning well?
Wow.
It's a bit of a big one.
No, there's a lot, you see. There's a lot. It's a big question. There's a lot of things. I think from deprived backgrounds, you've got crime, organised crime, especially lads. It's always a temptation. It's always something waiting to grab young lads of a certain demographic.
Yeah.
Rather than taking the road of education, achievement, it's easier to go and, maybe ride your bike and shot a little bit on the street. So that's a temptation for them. I think there's also kind of the family. You get a lot of kids from broken families, fatherless homes, mums struggling just to kind of get them in. You end up chasing the mums up, saying, "Where are they?"
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they're trying to get the kids in, but the kids running wild in a sense. So they're some of the challenges I've faced day to day. But it's also kind of, I think, on the establishments, the educational establishments, to make that a place where the kid wants to come and to try and alleviate some of those those tough circumstances those kids are in. How do we alleviate them? How do we serve that kid?
Yeah.
Even though they're coming from where they're coming from, they might have addict parents or, do you know what I mean? There's police raiding, bursting the door, and that kid comes in on a Monday and he's 10 minutes late. Do I just start shouting at him when the police have ran through his door this morning? Do you know what I mean? It's kind of, it's a challenge. It's definitely a challenge. That's what I see grabbing the kids.
Yeah. My question there, though, is whose responsibility is it? Because what I find is you've got this child and you've got all these people and parties that stand around the child. So, you've got the teacher that they see every Monday to Friday. You've got the parents or the guardians at home. You've got these friendship circles and whoever they're out and about with outside of school in hours. You've got, you have the government. You have all these institutions that exist and these powers that be. But my question is, when we start seeing these very specific issues meeting all our students, whose responsibility is it to protect the child, to support the child, to intervene when we feel that actually that child's in a vulnerable place and it feels like no one else is doing anything about it? Like whose is it?
I think it's everyone's responsibility. I think it's we can put it on the parent. I think I was blessed to have a 2-parent home, so that is something that a lot of these kids don't have.
Yeah.
But I knew boundaries. My mother was a fierce woman, so she took no messing. But it kept me in line, especially teenage boys, when they get to a certain age. So the parents, firstly, they've got to teach them values and teach them to respect authority, value education, their attitudes towards crime and violence and stuff like that. But if that's not in place, it comes down to the wider culture. And I think all of those things you mentioned are involved. I think one of the reasons we have all of these issues is a lot of these kids are in areas where there's counterproductive cultures. So there's cultures where crime is celebrated. There's cultures where single parent families, and I'm not being down on single parent families, some mothers do amazing jobs and some fathers do as well. I've seen a lot of mothers. But kind of the need there for that culture to lift up certain values instead of promoting values that do not aid the kid, they hinder them. So then the teachers are trying to do the best. We've had teacher training where you're told to try and fill the gap of the parents, which is, you've got 30 kids in a class. Yeah. It's really hard. It's impossible to do, to be honest. You might pick 2 or 3 and go, I'm going to have to work on them. So the teachers, the youth leaders. So I was, again, blessed. We had loads of youth centres when I was a kid. And I had youth leaders who took us on trips. They took us to Cornwall, to Wales, to Spain. And they were from our culture. So they were giving us background to what they'd experienced and kind of what paths to take. It's that kind of role modelling that has got to be done by the parents, by the teachers, by the youth, by the kind of youth workers, but the whole community. It's on a community to form a culture.
Yeah.
And whatever culture they produce will be placed upon the child. Does that answer your question? I'm talking a lot here.
It does answer my question. I think the reason I'm struggling with it is that I think of myself being a teacher and being in a classroom, like you said, you've got about 30 kids. And let's say 40% of those kids come from absolute disruption at home. And that all presents in very different ways, whether it's mental health issues, so just an inability to learn, so learning difficulties in whatever way, shape or form, or just non-attendance. It could be anything. And it's my responsibility as a teacher is to ensure that, number one, my students show up, that they are engaged, that they are learning, and that I'm able to sort of report on their learning. But I can only do so much if that child is dealing with so many other issues. Like learning is not on the top of that child's agenda. Oh. So to some degree, you know, I might sit there feeling like a failure because I haven't been able to make child A, B or C engage or pass. But then I think, okay, so if the responsibility is the parent, what if the parent feels like they've done everything that they can do, but it seems like outside influences outside of the home have had more influence than the parents parenting? Then what do you do there? And then, yes, we've got the institution to think about. So I think I struggle with it because I think the issues that are facing our students continue to prevail. So do we then conclude that we've all just collectively failed to raise just children in a healthy manner that allows them to kind of engage with the world in a healthy manner? You know what I mean? So it's just so that's why I just think, like, you know, how do we even begin to address these issues facing families, students, as young people as a whole? I just look at the amount of students that we were referring to CAMS and the fact that there wasn't even enough resource. These kids are on a 6-month to a 2-year waiting list to access mental health service, and you're thinking, so what more does one do if we can't even refer a child to the appropriate professional? You know, that's not even a question. That's just my thought.
No, it's real. It's real, isn't it? It's real because as teachers, so many teachers are leaving the profession.
Yeah.
But it's because the weight that is being placed on the shoulders is unbearable because they cannot shoulder the responsibilities of the wider culture in not raising the kids or not teaching the kids certain things. And the mental health is like, it's catastrophic. Do you know what I mean? It's the amount of safeguarding reports you're putting in and stuff like that. But I think it is kind of, we can look externally and there's reasons externally in terms of funding, in terms of kind of priorities. But I think for me, what I've always tried to teach the kids to do is to look internally. Like kind of, what are you doing? How are you contributing to your future? What does that look like? Because the external, we campaign and we all complain. But the internal is what we have control of. Even in our communities. What we champion, what we value. So I try and teach every kid to consider those bigger questions, especially the kids that are running down a road that's going to lead to jail, death, or just general kind of despair. You get a lot of kids who, because they're coming from certain backgrounds, there's despair, there's hopelessness. I've seen it. I've sat with kids crying. Do you know what I mean? And kind of had to lift them up and point them to something greater, something, you know what, there is all of these barriers, but what can we do? Do you know what I mean? And I've seen kind of successes which have lifted my heart and made me think, this is why I teach. And then for all of them, there's the one who goes to jail, there's the one who dies. I've seen that as well. So it's a battle, but it's one that teachers need to fight and the whole culture needs to fight. But if we back off and just complain, which is great in our culture, we love complaining. Do you know what I mean?
We do.
We do it on. If you go on Twitter, like everyone's just complaining. But the solutions are not just to complain, but to actually step in, take action, and give these kids the kind of love, support, and guidance that they need. Even if that is they're not receiving it from home. Let's do it, and let's do it honestly, not to make them feel good, but to prepare them for life.
Yeah. I think what I find interesting is what you were speaking about before when you were kind of looking at some of the social issues and looking at perhaps instances where we don't get 2-parent families or stable home scenarios that these children get to live in, and kind of experienced some stability, for me, it kind of highlights the need for role models where there haven't been role models or haven't been positive role models. And I guess to some degree, as a teacher, I look at you and I think, well, to some degree, you might be just that positive father figure to some, that positive role model of you were about it. You've grown up in the same streets, yet you are able to, have a family, hold down a job and, experience some kind of stability, even though perhaps for these kids that, they haven't been able to experience that. So I think role models is such a key thing. How can we be positive role models, but how can we be visible role models? Because I feel like sometimes these examples of positive role models are not showcased enough. They're not brought to the forefront, like you said. Crime culture often being celebrated, so the wrong role models being celebrated. Sometimes, you look on the internet, the people that are being celebrated and going viral aren't necessarily positive role models. So I think that's an issue. How many times did I just say role models in a sentence?
It's okay, it's passionate.
But so yeah, that's what I'm saying. That's the word that was kind of ringing in my head as you were speaking then, a need for role models, positive ones at that.
And I think that that is massive. Like your role model will determine a lot of what you kind of step into as a kid. It'll be your first role models are your parents. You glean from them, and then as you get older, it's your friends.
Yeah.
You glean to the coolest, coolest friend or coolest kid.
Yeah.
Which isn't always the right kind of cool, but you look towards them and you glean from them. And as you get older, it broadens. But I think those stages, your parenting role models, are we celebrating parenting in our culture? Or is it seen as just a burden? Do you know what I mean? Kids are a burden. Are we teaching kids about the company they keep? I remember when I was a kid and I started hanging around with the boys, my mum let me know, she was like, nah, maybe from these, stay away from them. I didn't listen to her, but she was there. She was reminding me, because the company you keep it'll determine a lot of your life. Your company will affect your character. So those role models, from the family to the street to all of those things, and I think even from the media, like you talked about it before, even something like this is good role modeling from you and what you're trying to do. Kids are always on screens. Do you know what I mean? It's the state of our culture now. We're a screen-based culture. So that they have someone like you instead of someone who's promoting kind of terrible ideas and aggression as an answer or money as an answer. It's good to have those role models that meet them where they're at.
Even then though, Miles, content like this is not content that particular generation is going to access, because it's laborious, because they've got to listen and watch to the end and actually learn something. It's not kind of just entertain, the kind of 10-second, 30-second swipe where you get to laugh, like, and swipe. Again, as much as we try and make it visible and available, again, it's just not content that they would engage in, because it's not pop culture. Do you know what I mean?
But then the mums might watch it.
True.
The dads might watch it. So again, you're meeting the home. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they pass that on to the kids. Kids will watch all kinds of madness, trust me. I see my kids me and my daughter were laughing at Andrew Tate today about what colour is my Bugatti.
Right.
But it was just kind of they're going to laugh at nonsense, but they learn from you the most. They imitate you. So are we giving the best kind of role models to imitate? It's for our kids to imitate, and that's the challenge to me. All I can control is me.
Yeah.
But if I can be a role model to the man next to me or the woman next to me and say, we can do this, it'll change our culture for the better.
Absolutely.
But there's the dreaming, there's the talking, and there's the reality.
Yeah.
And that's day-to-day sacrifice. That's day-to-day doing your job.
Showing up for the kids.
Yeah, and I think that's hard. I think that's harder because we can give people an alibi and give reasons to blame.
Yeah.
But we actually need to give people a sense of they can take responsibility. There will be support.
Yeah.
But you need to step in to to what you've already physically stepped into, step into it. And, you know, great things can happen.
Absolutely. I think my big takeaway from you anyway is that it's everybody's responsibility. Now, the reason I don't like that phrase that it's everyone's responsibility is when we make something everyone's responsibility, it's no one's responsibility.
Yeah.
So it's like you have like 50 people in a room, someone drops something, like whose responsibility is it to pick it up? We've all seen it, it's dropped.
Yeah.
But if we take it in the most literal sense that it's each and every single one of us' responsibility to make a contribution to these social issues that we face, I think the world would be a better place should we choose to act on it. Finally, I wanted to kind of wrap up on 2 questions. Firstly, on the issue of teacher striking. I'm going to keep this one brief. Number 1, did you strike? If so, why? If not, why not? But number 2, how do you actually manage the demands of the teaching profession? Because it's not an easy one. There's a lot that is being asked of teachers. How are you engaging with that? Did you strike?
Did I strike? I'll answer that first. I didn't strike.
Okay.
So I obviously come from a military background. Okay. So I was taught to crack on.
Yeah.
Instilled into me. I've tried to shake it off. I'm still trying to shake it off. But I've been shaped to crack on. So for me, some of the kids I work with, a day off school isn't good for them.
Yeah.
So they could be getting up to all sorts. They're getting robbed or they're robbing or, you know what I mean? All kinds of things. So I just thought, I won't strike.
Yeah.
Not that I don't think there isn't a place for striking and it isn't important. But I think, the kids are my first priority.
Yeah.
Bigger than my wage.
Yeah.
Obviously the lecky's got to stay on. My kids have got to get fed. Do you know what I mean? But yeah, the kids have got to be our first priority and we've obviously got to be rewarded for what we do.
Yeah.
And that's got to be appropriate to the level of kind of demand and the workload. But yeah, some of those issues, I feel like sometimes are too big for me.
Okay.
And that's not me like shaking responsibility. That's just me I try and live the life in front of my eyes. Do you know what I mean? I try not to get caught up too much politically and stuff like that because I've seen people consumed by it. Where it's never enough. Do you know what I mean? So yeah. The first bit, no, I didn't.
Okay. I respect
that. The second bit, can you repeat that again? Sorry.
How are you managing the demands of the teaching profession? Because, this is the reason why everyone's striking. You're not getting paid enough and you're being asked far too much.
Yeah, I think managing it, I think it's your approach to work for me, firstly. Sometimes they ask everything of you, especially if there's an Ofsted inspection coming up or there's some kind of review going on. They ask everything of you, and there's a time to say no.
Yeah.
There's a time to say, this isn't just a machine.
Yeah.
These are people. These kids aren't just statistics. These are people. So I have no qualms with saying to my boss, no. So I've shaken off that military urge to kind of say, yes, sir. It's like, no, I've got to go and live.
Yeah.
I've got to go and have a weekend.
Yeah.
I've got to go and see my kids and, make my wife happy. Do you know what I mean? Which is my first responsibility. Aside from your statistics looking good and your portfolios looking good. That is important, but not at the detriment to everything else.
Yeah.
And I think if work consumes you and it's all you kind of root yourself in, it can really weigh you down. And I see that with a lot of teachers because they're trying to get the whole clipboard ticked off when it's almost unworkable in the hours you're being paid for. So the one answer is pay us more, but the other is what's the culture around work?
Yeah.
Are we saying that we're just economic people? Do you know what I mean? And that's all we're about. Because I think that's a lot of the problem with education. It's just economic.
Yeah.
It's about money, and that's not what education's about. It's about shaping kids and preparing them for life, sending them out to live. Not about this. It's turned into money, and it's turning a lot of people off.
I agree with that. Finally then, we've looked at your career journey to some degree. We've looked at some of the highlights and we've addressed some of the issues facing students, some of the sort of the cultural, social issues. My question is, as a person of faith, now you identify as Christian, how does your faith impact or shape the way that you view everything that we have spoken about? So the way that you engage with work, the way that you engage with the students specifically, the way that you engage with all these social issues presented to us on a daily basis. How does your faith as a Christian man impact the way that you engage with all this?
I think the first thing it gives me is joy.
Okay.
And that's
sounds like an oxymoron.
Yeah, it gives me joy in a sense of we live in quite a joyless culture.
Okay.
In a sense of like everything seems to be a bit of a slog. Do you know what I mean? And it's culture wars are always ongoing, and if you go on social media, there's always someone shouting back and forth at each other. But I have a joy in what I do. I have a joy in kind of getting to see the kids every day, having a laugh with them, asking them how they're doing, being a part of their life. Do you know what I mean? It's a privilege. So there's a real joy there. It also gives me hope in a sense of what I'm doing isn't in vain. It isn't something that I'm just picking up a wage and I'm not actually making a difference. Like that little incident where I listen to a kid or I help a kid, or they might be suffering severe mental health issues and some of them are contemplating ending their lives. And I've chased kids down when they're on the way to do that.
Wow.
And just tried to pull them back. Not to, I can save them because I can't, but to say that life is a gift, and it's something that that you can treasure and you can enjoy, and you can, there's hope, and that kind of. So even when I look at the culture and the culture's messy, there's still hope. Do you know what I mean? And that's not a pipe dream hope. That's kind of like, in the midst of all this, good can come from it. Do you know what I mean? And I think faith, especially as a Christian, Christianity we hold up a cross. It looks like it's a bit crazy because it's a medieval way of torturing someone to death. It's like the worst death the Romans could think of. But it's actually like through the suffering, there's something greater and something hopeful that comes out of it. So whenever I'm interacting with kids, people, culture, I'm trying to point people to hope. And I've seen that with kids. I've seen kids come back from the brink. I've seen kids become men and women, and just do great things. I've also seen kids do terrible things, and my faith kind of helps me to process all of that, to view it rightly. Because if it was just me and my own strength, I'd either put a cape on my back and be flying around, spent because I'm not Superman, or I'd break under the pressure. So I think my faith helps me to trust God and to know that what I'm doing is a worthy cause. So
Beautiful. I could see the satisfaction on your face as well as you kind of spoke about the joy and the hope. So that's a really beautiful thing. I'm going to leave that there. I think that's a nice sober way to end this episode.
Sober.
Very sober. Thank you, Miles. Thank you for
Chiedza.
coming on. It's been really
interesting. Thank you, lads.
Thanks, Greg. Shout out to Greg. Thank you for listening to this week's episode. To make sure you don't miss the next one or the one after that, ensure to follow us on all podcast platforms and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.